Maybe this is better.
That is perfect. Yeah.
Sometimes they let me down, the AirPods. Normally they're all good, but
I mean, it might be me. I've had some weird technical stuff, but hey, I can hear you fine now.
I think it's the mixing of Apple products with Samsung. They just don't get on. So
Oh, dang. Mm. Hey, so where are you?
I am at home in my kitchen. I have
Love.
this stood on an air fryer.
Oh, you know, as you as you do. Okay, so basically, I got you on because I want to know all about how to build muscle, and I know that not only have you researched this a lot, but you've spoken to a lot of people who research in this area. So I
Yep.
thought you'd be sort of a fountain of knowledge in this. So I wanted to discuss not only what like the science and the research says, but your practical experience and experiences you've had with clients, and I guess like taking that and actually putting it into context of like what is actually, in your opinion, or in I guess our opinion, that will sort of form
Yep.
the best for building muscle.
No, yeah, that sounds great. I mean, I've been fortunate enough. Well, that's basically what the podcast has become, is basically how do I grow the most muscle possible? Because that's literally the thing I'm obsessed with. So I just try and bring on everyone who I think has a lot of knowledge on that subject matter, and then take away what I get from them and then apply it myself to either my training or other people's training and see what sticks, what doesn't. So yeah, I absolutely love this sort of topic.
Cool. And just to give a little sort of background, like I know you compete in bodybuilding, like how many years have you been doing that? Like a bit about how you've managed to build your physique so far, and then like where you want to take that next.
So yeah, I mean, I competed the first time in natural bodybuilding in 2014, and then I competed last year as well. So I've only competed in 2 years, but in that time I did 2 shows in my first season. I did 2 novice shows. Didn't do amazingly, but did fine for a first-time competitor. I still managed to get my glutes in, so I was really happy with that. And then actually between 2014 to 2017, I really managed to build my physique to look completely different. So in 2017, I actually ended up competing 4 times because I didn't expect it, but I managed to get to 2 British finals in the UK DFBA and the MPA, which was really cool and not expected. And I managed to get third in the British finals for the MPA, and I came fifth? Yeah, fifth in the UK DFBA. The UK DFBA is very, very competitive. The MPA is great, but it was a much smaller show. So it kind of both represented where I needed to go. And I mean, the feedback still from the judges is I need more size for my frame. So that is still my overall riding passion. And I think that's really helped me because I've never been kind of, and I hate to bring out like the genetic card, but I've never been kind of endowed with loads of muscle mass and just anything works. I have to be very careful about the methods I choose, and I have to work really hard to get what I get, which I think has only helped me learn more about it, because I think the people that have the hardest time often have to kind of really, really research into it to find out what the methods are that work best. Because if we spend too much time doing stuff that doesn't work particularly productively, we're just not going to get anywhere. If you look at someone I really look up to, Brad Schoenfeld, I think we can all agree that he is like the hypertrophy expert. He, like, no doubt about it, is doing the most research in the field. He's been there the longest, and he's helped kind of thousands of people build amazing physiques. But when you look at Brad, you might not think that guy is the hypertrophy expert. You might not kind of relate that. I mean, he's jacked, but he's not massive. And I think that just is credit to him, really, because I imagine he has had a really hard time building his own physique. And I think he'd probably be the first person to say it. So a lot of people like him I draw inspiration from. So yeah, I'm really happy with where I've got to date, but my main goal is hopefully to compete next time. Maybe 2020 is when I've kind of got my eyes on, to look like a contender to win like a British final and potentially like go abroad and compete in these federations and potentially go pro at some stage. If I could do that, then I'd be just unbelievably proud. But I know I need to bring a lot more tissue to stage to be able to compete. So I need to be much higher in my weight class, because the guys who are just on, like, they're like at the upper end of the weight class, who are absolutely ripped to shreds, and they're like my height or shorter. It's like, how do you kind of battle with that sort of person? So yeah, that's where I want to get to, and that's kind of where I've come from.
you brought up some really interesting points. So I was just like writing little notes that I wanted to like pick you up
Oh,
on,
cool.
but especially like the genetics and sort of who you're following. So, you know, probably the top people in their game in everything, not just bodybuilding, but like all sports, shouldn't be the ones you're following. Like, you know, you look at, say, Usain Bolt, like, should you be doing his training? He can almost do anything. And despite that, he's going to be the world's fastest man. Like, I'm not saying he doesn't train hard. Well, actually, I am, like, in some ways, because I guess now or before he retired, he probably did train hard. But, you know, there were stories of him when he was younger, like a younger athlete, like, oh, I couldn't be bothered to warm up. So I was just, like, chilling out, like, with my mates, like, and then they told me the final. So I just rocked up, like, walked along and won the final. Like, that's like a world junior final that you've just won. Like, his genetics are amazing. So it's actually, in some ways, like, the best athletes do not make the best coaches because they've never had to struggle and they've never, you know, they're like, oh, this just worked for me. And like, a lot of people, same in bodybuilding, could kind of train in any way and still get results because they, you know, they're naturally that gifted. And I think when you look at really the top of each sport, you are looking at those sort of genetic freaks that are going to be amazing no matter what. So it's kind of interesting to see, you know, people who have had to really graft for it. They're the ones that are probably going to know the most about what's going to work. So like kind of yourself, although I think you've got great physique, but like Brad as well, like, you know, it's obviously someone who's not just turned up like, oh, I've always been this big and muscly, like it kind of just happened. So that was really interesting. And then secondly, the fact that you have competed, so is it 3 years between your shows?
Yeah, 3 years.
Yeah, and I think that just goes to show like probably what most people should do. But you often get people, oh, they compete every single year and they look basically the same every year, even though they really should, you know, especially in natural bodybuilding, but probably in both really, that they can't really add any tissue in that time. So I guess what would be interesting is to look at, and you said that you looked completely different the second time because you took those 3 years. Like, what did you do in those 3 years?
Cool. Yeah, I mean, just to touch on your points, one that will like put it into the listeners' minds immediately is like, in the gym, if you ask the guy with the biggest arms, how did you get those big arms? They don't often have a very good answer. Whereas if you ask the guy who had tiny arms, who has like okay arms, he'll be like, man, I did so much research, I did this, and he'll actually be able to give you some useful information. Like when people ask me, how did I get such big glutes? I'm just like, well, I didn't really do anything for them. I tried to actually focus on quads and hamstrings and my glutes just came with it. So I think that's a really good thing. And like you said, between the shows, it's time. Muscle growth is slow. It's really slow, especially when you get to, like, I think a lot of people get stuck once they're intermediate and they've got a decent amount of muscle and they struggle to take it to that next level because maybe they're inconsistent and the growth is slow and they don't think about periodization and all the important things we're probably going to touch on. And yeah, they just stagnate and then they don't get anywhere over years. Whereas, yeah, the best natural bodybuilders in the game, you look at someone like Jeff Alberts, he's been doing it for years on years and years. And yeah, he's coming into his prime, like, and he's in his 40s, I think now, and he's got like a whole family and like wife and kids. So it's amazing to see that. And it is like the epitome of natural bodybuilding is a sport of delayed gratification. That's always the way I like to think about it. And people hate that, but it truly is. And the same goes for like other categories, like you said, like even bikini. You see there's bikini competitors going in year and year and year. And actually now bikini competitors are quite muscular and they need to have trained for a decent amount of time because the judges don't want kind of gaunt, skinny physiques. You even look at like, I think it was like Mrs. England or Mrs. America or the Mrs. Universe. And this is just like an attractive female generally is like what it's judged on, I guess. And they're even getting more muscular. So it's just showing how trends are going towards that sort of thing. So to answer the actual question you asked, how did I get more muscular? How did I look different from 2014 to 2017? I think it was just one, and the biggest thing that I've just touched on is time and consistency. So it's something I really pride myself on is being consistent with what I'm doing. And I kind of, if I go into something, I go all in. So you mentioned the podcast, and you see quite a lot of podcasts kind of in the fitness realm come in and they kind of fall out. And something I pride, and we pride ourselves on, Pascal, he was commenting earlier, saying some jokes. Something we pride ourselves on is getting an episode out every week. And something I pride myself on with training is hitting every single session whenever I can, because that's so important. When you miss a session, it's an opportunity missed to keep the muscle growth going. And if you kind of consistently do that, that's consistently not building the physique that you want. So that's something that was massively pivotal to my success, was time and consistency. And then it was thinking about things like we're going to talk about. We know the science and we can apply that to ourselves. And I think you can get a bit stuck in a rut in that you think you have to do it a certain way. And I was following programs from kind of people, and I had a coach in 2014. I was continuing on those programs. I was watching a lot of natural bodybuilders kind of get into powerlifting, and I was kind of doing that. And I was kind of just didn't have a good understanding, a good grasp of the principles. And I just knew I needed to work hard and kind of progressive load. And it was only until I kind of really thought about things deeply when I started to see better results. So I started thinking about specificity, and I thought, well, I'm not a powerlifter. So if I want to get as big and jacked as possible, I probably shouldn't focus on just deadlifting, squatting, and benching. Especially deadlifting just used to beat me up and destroy the amount of volume I could do. So I started thinking and getting a bit more clever with my training and trying new things and seeing what stuck with me and what didn't. And that's really where the progress came, I believe anyway. And someone who really helped open my eyes a little bit to thinking a bit differently was Mike Israetel. Anyone who follows me knows Mike Israetel has played a big role in kind of my career in the fitness industry, but also my own results, because he really challenged some of the ways I used to think about things. I follow like Eric Helms and everyone before then, and then he just used to have like different takes on studies and different takes on the way to do things. I even remember I was talking about beta-alanine to him and how I use that as one of my supplements because it helps in the higher repetition ranges. And he kind of challenged me on it. He was like, why would you take beta-alanine? It's buffering away the metabolites, which is one of the pathways to hypertrophy. For a bodybuilder, it's maybe not something you want to do. And I was like, I've never thought about it like that. So I think learning from him, the scientific principles of strength training, one of their ebooks, was brilliant. It kind of set out principles, and then I just started delving into those and applying them to bodybuilding and saw results coming from there. But yeah, the biggest one is consistency and having a bit of a knowledge base of what to apply and get a bit more specific with my training.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I guess one thing I wanted you to touch on was how big a surplus you go into, because there's always this sort of argument between putting on a whole load of size and it being a lot of fat as well and big bulk, or just being in sort of slight surplus so you keep that muscle sensitivity. And yeah. I guess you touched on it, like the fact that it takes so long to build tissue. Do you really need to be in that big a surplus, because you can't possibly use all that extra energy to build tissue, to build muscle tissue?
No.
So what, like 3 years, what sort of approach did you take, and do you have like a percentage surplus that you normally put people in?
No, yeah, completely. It's something I didn't really touch on because I think, at least for me, it was something that was quite obvious that I needed to do. People hear of bulking, so you kind of know that a surplus is going to help with things, and it was more so the training. I think a lot of intermediates, assuming they have background in kind of nutrition, it's the training side that they need to take more care of. But yeah, with nutrition, and I've kind of done in my early stages of kind of training and things, I just was like doing what I thought was a clean bulk and just had a huge surplus. I was gaining tons of weight, got really fat quickly, and I was kind of like confused because I was eating all clean food. And I think a lot of people have done that approach. And then I also went down more of the slower approach, like you mentioned. I was aiming to gain like 1 pound per month. And when I think about that now, I kind of cringe, because I think about how do you even monitor 1 pound per month? I just find that such a small amount. Like, you could go to the bathroom and you're 1 pound different. You could have a meal out and you could be 3 pounds up. Like, there's so many fluctuations, and even with averaging things out, I found that really held me back, because there'd be months where I'd gain like 3 pounds, then I'd cut back, and then I'd end up losing those 3 pounds, and I'd just end up yo-yoing between kind of just basically a bit of a maintenance period. And so then I found, okay, so going really fast doesn't go anywhere. Going super slow and almost just maintaining doesn't help me. You want to find that sweet spot where you're gaining an appreciable amount. So you know you're getting a bit fluffier. You know you're gaining some fat there, but you know for sure your scale weight's going up, your performance is going up, and you're gaining muscle mass and you're not maintaining. So that also, the key thing I think with a surplus isn't there's like a perfect amount for everyone, and I don't think there's a perfect amount on the scale, because I think the scale is brilliant but can be really misconstrued with all the water kind of changes. Even things like soreness can cause more water retention, and then you're going to be higher in that week. So I think you really need to focus more on kind of performance and just making sure you're eating enough to perform your best. And I do think there is a bit of a trend towards, if you eat in like a more of a surplus, you can recover from more. I don't think you can kind of overeat and just recover from everything. But I think if you're in like maintenance or slightly above that, I think you could hamper your results slightly. Whereas if you went into a slightly more assertive one, knew you were gaining weight, and your performance was as good as it could be, I think you're really putting your chances forward for gaining muscle mass, especially when you're more advanced. I think because it becomes so much harder to really get those things going. But importantly, the most important thing is that performance is increasing, because that's kind of like the match for muscle growth, and then the fuel is the nutrition that's coming in. If you're eating tons but not performing better, you're not going to see any muscle growth there. So yeah, that's kind of my approach to nutrition, I think.
I like that you're kind of focusing much more on performance, because like you say, it's really hard to measure if you're increasing muscle mass, especially when you're looking at such small increases that could never be measured accurately on the scale anyway. So looking at performance as a measure of that, definitely something that I would suggest as well. We've got a few questions. So someone's just asked loads, but let's see. I'm doing a full body strength workout now, guys. What do you think? Well, that doesn't offer much context, but it sounds great. Maybe not that one. He says he's gaining 1 pound of lean muscle mass a month, which, I mean, you're probably not, let's be honest. But it's very hard to measure that. And unless you're quite new to strength training, that's a lot of muscle to be adding. Yeah, so Fitch Fitness, he's one of my good friends. He's saying he tends to just push up his calories when he feels it's stalled, which I guess is like the perfect way to do it. You know, you set a benchmark and then you monitor and adapt from there. And it's exactly the same way that you do for fat loss. You know, you'd set what you think is about, I don't know, a good deficit for you. Then when your fat loss stalls, you'll lower that again. And I guess the same is true for bulking as well. Do you do any sort of cycling of dieting? So do you do a phase where you're in a surplus for a while and then bring it back to maintenance, or do you just stick in a surplus the whole time?
Yeah, so just to touch on your answer there, I completely agree that kind of you change things when you see a stalling. There's no point kind of you can't really preempt what the body's going to do, especially when you're trying to grow muscle. It's a slower process. So in fat loss, sometimes you might make an adjustment if there's a stall for like 1 or 2 weeks, but muscle growth, like it's slow, so you might not even look that acutely to make changes. So no, great points there. And yeah, with the way I do things in an off season is definitely I like a bit of a cyclical and periodized approach to training and nutrition. And I think something that actually helped me massively in that off season was putting them together and kind of as if they're synergistic. So when you're trying to make physique changes, you are training for muscle growth. So you're kind of in hypertrophy. If you're just training to kind of you're holding, maybe you just ended diet and you want to hold on to your lean tissue and just maintain that lower kind of settling point so that you can hold a leaner physique for longer, or enter another diet afterwards, then it makes sense to lower training volumes, just maintain what you've got. And that allows a lot of fatigue to come down as well. So I like this kind of cyclical periodized approach with training and nutrition. And I don't think they're for everyone. I do like entering mini cuts now and then. I think they are more advanced and you have to be really careful at how you implement them, and don't use them as a way just to kind of feed your ego and stay really lean, because like we've talked about, kind of fat gain is something that is appropriate and it's a known thing that has to happen when you're more advanced. And actually there becomes a point, and I hate even thinking about it, but I know it's completely true, where the ratio of fat to muscle gain goes into favor of fat, where you're actually gaining more fat over time than muscle. And it's just a cost of doing business. And I always try and say that to clients, like, you can't have it all. Like when you're trying to diet, you don't look your biggest and fullest when you're trying to gain muscle, you're not going to look your leanest. So yeah, I like to move people kind of, if we're thinking about competitors, kind of get to a stage over their stage weight where they start to feel like performance is really increasing, because like we said before, training is the most important thing. If you're going to gain muscle mass, you have to be performing really well. So you want to get them to a body fat where they feel like they can train really well, and then move up to a point where you think is appropriate, where maybe they're feeling incredibly full all the time. They're feeling like their hunger's not high. They're getting quite like fat essentially, and they're losing their abs. Maybe this is for some people 20% body fat for males. Maybe it's closer to like 28% for females, or it could be like 16% or like 25%. It depends on the person. Some people really perform well when they've got a bit more tissue on them, even if it's fat, just helps lubricate things, and make them feel more productive. So I like to then do something like a mini cut, get them by themselves some more massing time, and they can kind of probably do this cyclical approach where they mass up a bit and then cut back a bit, mass up a bit, cut back a bit, kind of 3 times or so. And then there probably becomes a point where they're so massed up, they maybe hit a new kind of body weight they've never seen before. They've got the most muscle mass they've ever had, but they've got an appreciable amount of fat. Then I like to enter something like a maintenance phase to kind of hold on to that position so that the body doesn't just like chuck all away that lean tissue. And it kind of sounds a bit bro-y, but this is where kind of the science hasn't really got a lot of data on it. But in practice, and when we've seen lots of kind of old coaches and a lot of the smart people I follow like to do this, where they just like let 100-calorie deficit potentially. So I think that's on kind of paper. I kind of like the stuff that Eric Helms has put out about percentages of body weight loss per week. Given kind of your body fat percentage, the more body fat you've got, the faster and more aggressive you can go. But that's all good, well said and done. There's so much individualization there, because some people love the fast deficit initially because it creates loads of buy-in. They love seeing the scale weight come down, and they just kind of prosper with that, and then see it kind of slow down as time goes on. Other people really struggle with big deficits. Maybe they haven't got a great relationship with food. Potentially they shouldn't even be dieting at that point, but they might just struggle with a big deficit. Maybe they've got like a busy family life, or just a lot on, but they have to diet at this period of time, or they've just constantly got this, so they can't find a low stress environment to diet in. And that's where you might just reduce it down. If they haven't got a deadline, there's no reason not to go slower. It's only really for like the physique competitors or the people who are really kind of on it with their stuff. Like a lot of my clients who really want to get the maximal results, kind of get in and out as soon as possible. Because yeah, dieting is bodybuilding a lot of the time. Like people focus a lot on the dieting side, but is trying to build up overall. So if maximal muscle growth is your goal, kind of get out of those dieting phases as quickly as you can. That is appropriate without risking excess muscle loss. Because like you said, yeah, you could do like a protein modified fast type approach, but your training is not going to be particularly good for very long in that sort of style.
Yeah, and then you've got to remember, as you're dieting, like being able to continue to train at a high intensity is so important to sort of, I guess, remind the body that it wants to keep this muscle.
Yeah,
yeah, I guess I think it was Rich Kozdecki that used to always say it to me, like, what builds muscle is going to maintain muscle.
Yeah.
And that's quite like, it's a simplistic note, but it kind of resonates with me. It's just like, yeah, actually, like, why would you suddenly go from lifting heavy weights in the off season to like just, you know, doing sort of fluff training when you're trying to diet down? So yeah, that's an interesting point. But we've got a question here, but I'm not quite sure what he means. So Lawrence said, what's your thoughts on the actual removal of brown and white fat cells? And I've not defer. Yeah. So we'll probably leave that one, unless you want to add some more context. Not totally sure what that means. Right. I don't want to keep you too long. My final question, what kind of split do you do? Or does that change between on and off season?
Cool. So no, I like this question because I think a lot of people do focus on, especially bodybuilders. We don't think about powerlifting like they think about periodization. They think about more than just a split. They probably think about like how many times a week do you squat, bench, deadlift, more so than like anything else. So for a bodybuilder, a split is often a really good thing to think about and have an idea about. However, I am not the biggest fan of thinking about splits too much. And this is largely by influence of Mike Israetel, because he introduced to me something called stress response adaptation, which is effectively like when you stress a muscle group, how long does it take to adapt and respond? Basically a recovery curve. And then this introduces things like, okay, so if you're doing like a push-pull leg split, you might be thinking, I only train biceps twice per week. When we think about the biceps as a muscle group, it's quite small. It probably doesn't take a huge amount of disruption and damage when we train it. So maybe actually the frequency of that muscle group can be a bit higher. Or if we think about abs and calves, these are like traditionally stubborn muscle groups that can just take an absolute beating and require loads of volume. So actually sometimes these can be done almost every single session of like a 4 or 5 day split, just because their adaptation curves and recovery curves are really, really quick. Whereas something like, for someone who's like Chad Wesley Smith with massive quads, he can cause a horrendous amount of disruption on his quads, like through a heavy squat session. So maybe he can only do like one heavy session on his quads, and then one lighter one, and then maybe kind of the next week another heavy one. So I like thinking about those and then setting up a split that effectively allows us to hit those in that way. But I do follow, if I'm thinking about a split, a push-pull, actually it's legs, push-pull, legs, push-pull. But I do hit my biceps 4 times a week. I hit my abs and calves 4 times a week. And delts 4 times a week as well. So they're in there, but everything else is hit pretty much twice per week. But I do have I have emphasis days, so I emphasize quads more on one of my lower days, hamstrings more on the other. I found if I try and emphasize both, the session I just get destroyed immediately. I can't really overload them both at the same time. But for upper body, I can pretty much overload everything during those sessions. So yeah, that's kind of how my split runs most of the time. During kind of periods of time where I'm lowering to maybe maintenance volumes and doing some strength training, I might go to 5 times per week. But I love being in the gym a lot, so I struggle to go and I love routines. So as soon as I start changing, I'm just like, this feels uncomfortable. I'll get back to what I was doing before.
Yeah, it is an interesting approach, and kind of what, like, in my head, I'm like, the more you stimulate that muscle and sort of tell it to grow, potentially the more it's going to grow. And like you're saying, with smaller muscle groups that can recover quicker, you can probably stimulate them more frequently. And it is an interesting concept, like, or especially if you've got sort of weak lagging body parts, or even back to the sort of specificity thing that you were talking about. Like, it's something that a lot of people forget nowadays. Yep. It's like, I need to do this, this, and this, or even as simple as like, I really want to up my squat, and they're like, I saw that someone was doing like a Bosu ball, blah blah blah, like that'll help with or I need to work on my core. And it's like, honestly, if you really want to get good at squats, or like you really want to be able to do a pull-up, like put it in your session more frequently. Like if you really want to be able to do a pull-up, why not do a set of, or like trying to do a set of pull-ups at the end of every session? Like the more you try and do it, the better you're going to get at it. And part of it's the skill, but part of it's just repeating that and using those muscles. Like that is what's going to get you the results for it. But yeah, I really like the more frequent stimulation.
Yeah, I think
kind of getting away with the, I guess, typical bro split of you train each muscle group once a week, and you can definitely do more than that. But also a very interesting concept that, you know, the bigger muscle groups, that might not be so true, and they do take longer to recover from. Okay, so someone's asking, could intermittent fasting potentially shorten the sleep you need? I do 17-7 and I sleep 5 hours a night, but I'm never tired. Can I still build muscle like this?
So I have some thoughts, only because I've been reading, I recently read Why Do We Sleep by Matthew Walker, which is a great book if anyone wants to learn about sleep. And he has done interviews on like London Real and Joe Rogan's podcast, which are just fantastic. Like anyone would enjoy those because we all sleep. And all he made me realize is how, if you're getting less than 6 hours sleep, you're putting yourself at risk of really severe health problems. And I know that sounds really scary, and I don't mean to scare someone, but this is kind of what he said about it. There's a rare number of people that can get away with very little sleep, but most of us, especially if we're training hard and like athletes, and I think there's been studies on this where they gave athletes extra sleep and they started performing even better, is we need that like 7+ hours sleep. I tend to try and get like 8 hours in bed, which I guess is like 7 hours of sleep. But I don't see how intermittent fasting could do anything in regards to sleep. Sleep is just kind of I would call it kind of a non-negotiable for most people.
Yeah, and especially if you're trying to train hard and build muscle mass, like you can only recover as much as, recovery is just as important as what you're doing in the gym. So you're probably going to be hampering your recovery. Someone says, why is Steve so good looking?
I'm going even more red now.
Steve's edema seemed to flare up more during massing or deep dieting phases. How does he handle this?
So yeah, I unfortunately do suffer from edema, and it's not completely known why. I've seen a few specialists about this. I think it's related to my accident that I had that kind of ages back, but I got a head injury and it caused all sorts of problems. And one of them was the inability to really balance electrolytes, and I had lots of complications with that. Now I can mostly be healthy with it, but sometimes it does flare up, and I think it's actually related to stress. And the person asking the question kind of highlighted that, in that it flares up during when I'm dieting and things like that. I think it's related to being, I tend to get it more when I'm leaner, so I haven't suffered from it for like the last 4 months because I guess I'm a bit more bulky. And even now I'm doing a mini cut and it's not flaring up at all. So I think very much it's related to stress, which makes sense because stress leads to the increase of cortisol, and that can lead to an increase in water retention. So I think that's what it is more than anything.
Interesting. Okay, one more question before we go. So higher frequencies of training, say 2 to 4 times a week, do you think this could potentially lead to more overuse injuries?
So for me, actually, if done appropriately, I think it would lead to potentially less, because you're actually getting less wear and tear, through each time. Because oftentimes it's the large amounts of single amounts of volume that can cause wear and tear issues. It is kind of individual. Some people find that higher frequencies are worse for it. Other people find they're better, but quite often it is a better approach for people's joints and things. And if you're doing it appropriately to the stress response adaptation curve of your muscle group, then it should be recovered by the time you're training again, or at least mostly recovered. And that's what you want it to be. And if it isn't, then you probably want to either change the amount of volume you're doing in sessions or think about lowering the training frequency. So I think if you're doing things smart, it shouldn't lead to those wear and tear issues, unless you're trying to like deadlift 4 times a week and you're really strong. Then yeah, that's just good. It's just not going to be good.
And in terms of when you're training each muscle group, like how many sets would you do on a muscle group? Because I guess one side of this is that once you have done maybe a couple of hard sets on one muscle group, you've kind of saturated that muscle protein synthesis response. So doing more isn't necessarily better, although that almost goes against the volume argument that, volume is the most important thing for hypertrophy. So what's your sort of take on that? I often question myself on that. I'm like, I know that volume is, at the end of the day, like biggest sort of implicator for building muscle, but I don't think that's all of it. And I think frequent stimulation is also quite important. And if you could split that up over the week, I think you'd get better results. Now, obviously, it'd be extremely hard to study that. And also, we know like how small these muscle mass increases are. So even if we could study it, could you measure that small amount of difference it's going to make? But yeah, so what are your sort of thoughts on that as opposed to volume alone?
So yeah, I think that absolutely, because the trouble people fall into with the volume idea is that more is better. And that's definitely not true. It's not true with hardly anything ever in terms of like fitness and things like this. And whilst I do think after you've got sufficient intensity, volume is the next important thing, you do get a risk of doing kind of unproductive volume, which you might call junk volume, which is the amount you'd want to avoid. So yeah, junk volume. So I think there isn't necessarily a set cap. There could be like small, not very strong, like novice trainees might be able to get away with doing loads and loads because they're not causing that much disruption or damage, whereas someone much stronger, kind of, they just do a couple of sets and they're destroyed. And then that comes down to like, how good is your mind muscle connection? How good is your form? We have to take those into consideration as well. But if you're doing like sets and they're almost mindless and maybe the weight is kind of not very heavy for you, or you're doing, your performance is quite a bit lower than what you'd expect it to be, you can be pretty guaranteed that's not productive volume. That's basically complete junk, because you are effectively causing extra fatigue, but you're not overloading. You're not causing any disruption that's positive. It's just kind of, I guess when we're thinking about stress, it's kind of like distress versus the other stuff you're doing was eustress. So I think that's the cap. But I think most sessions should leave you in a position where the next week you can do more. It's only really in your kind of the week before you're deloading potentially is where you get to that point where you're like, oh, I'm not sure if everything I'm doing is productive. And then if it's not, then at least the next week you're deloading. So you've kind of got that safety net of, if you build a load of inappropriate fatigue, you can wipe the slate clean. Yeah, that's the way I tend to approach it.
All right, well, that was very interesting.
Cool.
And questions were mine, but, you know, I really enjoyed the answers. So thank you very much for that. Someone asked, okay, this is your final one.
Okay.
What's your secret to have great mindset in the morning?
People love these, the morning routines and things, don't they? I've tried them myself. I think anyone's tried, like loads of people have tried them. And I used to go for, I think I used to watch like Jamie Alderton, and he used to go for his power walks in the morning. And so I trialed, and this was probably good for my comp prep because it was getting me loads of steps. I'd go for like 10,000 steps first thing in the morning. But since being in off season, I'm just like, no. So I literally just get up and I get ready and get straight to work. And I'm most productive in the mornings, and that's just how I like to do things. So I guess one thing I do, so people who follow me on Instagram are probably thinking, Steve, you always take a photo of your scale weight and put in a line of gratitude. Something I do, but I find because I do it every single day, I almost don't appreciate it as much as maybe I should. And so I have considered getting rid of it, but anytime I don't do it, people complain. So I'm kind of like, all right, I'll keep going. But I think if you... Yeah. So I don't really have any kind of great mindset tips in that regard.
Yeah, I think a lot of people want this sort of secret answer to like why everyone's so motivated in the mindset and all this, but you know, not even Jamie Alderton is always motivated. You just got to get up and do stuff sometimes. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for your time.